mean. Away with all reference to them Greeks. Away with, we have new materials, we have new building, ways of erecting a building. We don't need the Greeks anymore. So let's see how we do that. The buildings until, let me just take a sip of my tea here. Most buildings were made with iron. And there was a big fire in Chicago in the 1880s, and it burned down a lot of large buildings. Iron is good for a certain structure, for a certain height, but not for everything, and not really very good when a fire breaks out. So steel was invented, and steel is much harder and can do a lot of many more things. And steel has become the architectural basis for this, for the 21st century, for the 20th century, and of course still now. So what do we have here? One of the first office buildings that is higher than just a couple of stories, but it's still a little bit. It was done in the 1890s, and if you look they try to do away with the Greeks here, of course, but we still have a sort of a base, we have a body, and we have a very nice finishing crown up there. And when you look very carefully, all of these separations here on top are flattened out pilasters with a little bit of a capital on top and a little bit of a base and the bottom. They are not holding up the building. What's holding up the building, I will show you in just a second. I'll show you another building here. A department store in Chicago, also built around the same time. And the outside, the Chicago windows were invented, large windows, larger than was customary. And in between them, just small divisions. And this is not even masonry, this is tiles, that the building is white and it's tiled. So they're really just decoration. The structure that holds up the building is the steel underneath, the skeletal, like a skeleton. And I will show you how that functions. It is made with the steel, and this is called an I-beam. And why is it called an I-beam? Because it looks like an eye here, large eye. And here is another one. And of course, very, very important to build large buildings and tall buildings. And so what's happening here, in Germany in particular, this is the Bauhaus. The Bauhaus was an art school that was not fancy, high-nosed like in France, the École des Beaux-Arts, where most painters and sculptors and some architects studied, and that was considered the epitome of learning. But these were mostly engineers, people who had new ideas and were going to apply them to different ways of building. So when you see this, it's all a 3-story structure. It is all glass. And what you see inside here, we don't see it so well, but this is the skeletal structure underneath that is holding up the building. You see it a little bit better on this one here. Also, you see, not even in the corners is there any masonry, any stone, not even the corners, just a little bit of supports, and I think they're just mainly there to hold up the glass. Now, what happens here with some new thinking, this is an architect, Mies van der Rohe, who was working at the Bauhaus, and he said, well, if we have a skeleton, how high can we build that skeleton? He never actually built this one here, but you can see it's a drawing. This is what is holding up the ark, a skeletal thing, and you can hang on the outside what you will. You can hang out curtains. It would be a little windy up there. Or you can hang up glass, or you can hang up anything. It just becomes a skin. So that, I thought that is completely new thinking. And of course, that's what they did. He built this building that's called the Seagram's building on Park Avenue, Seagram's Whiskey. And have you seen that? Well, Madison Avenue and Park Avenue are all the same with these tall buildings now. The windows are whiskey brown, whiskey color, all the windows. And so that was many of the people from the Bauhaus after, or even in the late 1930s, had to flee and come to this country because the Nazis did not like that sort of thing. They wanted bombastic temple structures, really. You know, you can see the power and the might behind the Nazis. This was new thinking, and they had to leave. And so many of them came to this country, and Mies van der Rohe built this one in New York. Of course, this is what our cities ended up looking like. A little boring, would you say? Yes. A little boring, because they were all the same. One of the most prominent architects in this whole century, in my mind, is Frank Lloyd Wright, because he started thinking differently. And it was what he felt, now that we have the steel, we don't have to have a building that is square and has these regular divisions, and then we put glass on the outside. It's a shift in thinking, and I want to tell you a little story about that shift of thinking. When we started we used to have gas stoves in our kitchen, and we used to have gas on top, yes? And the gas needs some air, and so we have a little well under there, so the air can get and give energy to the gas. When we started having electric stoves, they did the same thing. They did little coils. They had a well underneath, and God forbid the milk spilled over. Then you had a job to clean up. And so that went on for a while until somebody thought, hey, we don't have to have those wells. We can have a flat surface. I think restaurants had been caught onto that earlier. And so eventually now you have a flat surface and you just push the right button and the right area heats up. That is a new thinking of what you can do with modern stuff. And Frank Lloyd Wright was a genius in that regard, in thinking that way. So he built I'll show you better pictures, but what he did, this is the fireplace of the house, and that is built with stone and steel. And then he, imagine, I wanted to bring a chopstick. Imagine a stick like that, and then cantilevered out in a windmill fashion. You can have different parts of the building, not under one roof. They could be separate, but they were anchored down in the middle. And that's what he did. He did it with a steel and cased in cement. The tried old and true cement, something the Romans used 2,000 years ago. But we do different things to cement, and it's a little different than at that time. So, Mr. Kaufmann wanted a house in the woods by that river, by that little stream called the Bear Run. Well, Mr. Frank Lloyd Wright said, we'll put it right over the stream. How about that? Well, he said and he did. Mr. Kaufmann paid for it. And here you can see these cantilevered segments that come out from, they're anchored in the fireplace and allow for a completely different idea of building and living. And he wanted people to see nature and be surrounded by nature and be away from the world of business and give yourself a place of refuge. Here is another little drawing. He built a staircase down to a platform. You can sit there and put your feet in the water. But that was the only reason. Nothing functional there, but it's little sort of a cute thing. So he has some things are covered, some things the glass goes to the outside. But the elemental structure is that he was using the new materials to a completely different way, like this one. You know what that is, right? Guggenheim Museum in New York. Now I don't know what's underneath that, because if I keep saying it's the steel, I don't know how they bent the steel like that. But there are ways apparently to support these massive slabs of concrete and shape it in any way you want. A very creative way. That was in the 1950s, 1959 or so. Well, the idea caught on. Sydney Opera House. A building doesn't have to have 4 walls and a roof. No, it can be in various sections. With the new materials, it was possible. And it was popular. Not only that, that is a TWA building in Kennedy Airport. I remember that. That was pretty new. I came to this country in 1961, 59. So it was just about the cat's meow at the time. to build like that. And really open spaces, no supports inside, open space, it looks like a bird that's flying away. And well, not everybody felt, we're talking about massing a big structure. How is the different masses, how are they arranged and done? Not everybody wanted to follow that. For example, how about that? That's a building you hate, Penny, right?
I do.
Because the architect does nothing with the massing. It's just a straight old building. No windows. And they said, well, we don't need windows because it's theaters and it's studios and there's things that you don't really need windows for. So, all right. But is it attractive? No. No? Who likes it? Well, the front of it. I mean, you stand next to that door and you feel like a mouse because it is so overwhelming. It's humongous. It's intimidating. And I think the architects who want to break up this mass had a better idea. But here it is. Or this one here, Louis Kahn built our library here at the Philip Exeter Academy. This is a square building. It has 4 walls. But the walls are not holding up anything. They are, first of all penetrated with windows. And actually, as you can see, there's no roof on top of there. There's another structure behind it that had wonderful windows. The library inside is really very beautiful. And what I don't like about it, that you don't know where the entrance is. They all look the same from all sides. And then there are architects who went really wild. Best Buy in Texas. They make this building look like it's falling apart. It reminds me of people who wear jeans that are all ripped and they pay $100 for it. Well, it is. I mean, why would you want to build something new that looks like it's decrepit and old, you know? But so since we have new materials and new ways of building, the architects, their ideas fly and do anything they want as long as it doesn't collapse. And so they did. Yeah, there's an arts high school in Los Angeles built by a very famous Austrian, Himmelblau, and he just went wild. He did anything. Speaking of massing, a high school, the next slide is from another viewpoint from that place. Look at that. Wow. I don't know how it functions, but it's wonderful to have crazy ideas, but they have to function as a school, and I hope they do. I hope they did. He also did this building, speaking of not needing 4 walls to hold up the roof. Can you believe this? It is a conference center in China. If you have enough money and pay him, well, he will do wonderful and crazy things for you, and they become wonders of the world, kind of. You go see these buildings. I don't really know. This is the door. You have to get in somehow, but I don't really know how this functions. Isn't that amazing? And there he also built another one. That is a museum for a union of bakers. Bakers, a baking union. You must have had a lot of money to have. Is this supposed to be a bunch of dough rising out of a pot? I mean, it is. I don't know. However, the structure underneath is this silvery outside is probably just a sheathing. It's just decorative, really, rather than structural. But I don't know how that is done underneath. Well, speaking of arts buildings, anybody know this? Speaking of doing something with all the masses that they have to accommodate that's going on, it's the Walt Disney Symphony Hall in Los Angeles. And I was in there sometime years ago. And I think when you come here, either you come out of the subway somewhere or you come with the bus, you really don't get the immense structure when you step back and take a photograph like that. It's huge. And but what do you think? As a building, never mind concert hall, how do you like it as a building?
It's fun.
It's fun. It's fun. It's playful. It's playful. That's true. So it is It's not a Greek temple with shiny marble, but it has a reflective surface which makes it light and pretty looking, and very inventive. Frank Gehry, I mean, really unbelievable. And he also did Bilbao, which is in. Has anybody been to Bilbao? Yes. Well, how was it?
Well, that was actually under construction when I was there.
Ah.
It was in the 90s.
Yeah.
It was still under construction.
Under construction.
Under construction.
Well, it was very controversial, but again, as you said, Ellie, it's playful. It's playful. It's doing something else. I don't know how it functions as a museum inside. Has anybody been inside? So how was that?
It was excellent. There's lots of spaces. There's lots of places for big exhibitions, halls for smaller exhibitions.
Yeah.
So
It was good. Well, you see, there's more ways to build a museum than the Metropolitan Museum. They're all old fossils at this point, you know. Well, then speaking of massing, let's walk up to Stratum. Let's walk up to the building. How do you like that?
No, Stratum.
How do you like that? Well, it's a relatively large building, but it's broken up in different sections, and I think it makes it very interesting.
It's an eye catcher, for sure.
Yes?
This just stimulates me to say, I think part of how we perceive a building has to do with its setting, the surroundings.
Yes.
And some of these buildings
Have a lot of space, and that's very.
This one does not have a.
Yes, that's very important. That is very important. But you have, there are some different colors, a black surface here, some glass. I don't know if that's brick or if that's wood, don't remember. And 2 stories, and really rather interesting. And right next door is the 110 grill. Again, you know, you could put like a museum piece with a big wall and a couple of windows and doors to have a restaurant. But I think it's much more interesting this way. Here, this section comes out. It's not a flat surface. It has a little life to it by being brought forward and receding parts of it. And here, some metal and some color. And I think this is absolutely adorable. You have the umbrellas out front, especially in the summer. And then, of course, if you build shopping centers down here at the bottom of the hospital, this is Portsmouth Avenue down here. You come down here from the hospital. Well, again, the architect wanted to make it more interesting. And so what they do is they break up the surface and do different things with it. Again, it's a little playful, if you can do that. Hannaford's not so different. Very nice supermarket, but a large supermarket instead of having a supermarket front. Here I have another better view, I think. You have to get there on a Sunday morning with no cars and take a picture. So again, it's a long stretch of 1-story buildings. And again, to break it up this way makes it really quite interesting. Unlike Market Basket. Well, I think the Mullers brothers built a supermarket. And they didn't spend money on a fancy architect. They've used, I'm making this up, they probably used a construction company who's done supermarkets, and they knew what they were doing. And they built a functional supermarket, never mind the aesthetics so much. And I must say, that's why we like to go to, maybe the savings they pass on to the customers. That's why we like to go to Market Basket. You know, and Hannaford is very nice, but it's a little more expensive. And of course, you get more even for visual satisfaction. Now, I have something else here. How about this? It's a building in Vienna, and the tenant on the top floor wanted more light. Maybe he was an architect. Wanted more light. So he broke through the roof, and he did that structure like this. I hope he owns the building, but you can't just have a tenant go through the roof like that. So I assume he did. That's another Himmelblau structure that we see here. Then we go look a little bit more into our own neighborhood. Well, what is this? The Exeter Hospital. A few years ago underwent a big renovation. So you see, it was a brick building, large brick building, nice large windows, and all in brown and framed, and the windows framed in black. And then they started adding, as we go down and look at the building, we'll see that much more lighter materials are being introduced. Like this one here, the entranceway. Let me have a little closer view from that. It's a silvery white. It's not exactly white. It's sort of a silvery color that again reflects the light and makes it look brighter. It cheers it up a little bit. I mean, do you feel this was when it was first done? People said, "Oh my God, look at that entrance." I kind of got used to it, and I thought it's not so bad, you know. A little playful here up here, and it provides a cover as you come in to the main entrance around the corner. This is the emergency section of it. Well, when they needed an expansion, what do when you need more space as a hospital, or a school? Well, you hope you own a little bit more property around that so you can expand. If you don't, you're in trouble. You have to build another building someplace else. And that's what happens often too. So what they did, they must have owned down the hill all that stretch of land, because that's where they started going toward. And this is what's happened. You see a little bit part of the old building, the windows framed in black, the brick here. And then this was part of the new addition. And there is still brick here. And instead of having a black frame, you have some white frame, some lighter colors is being introduced as you walk around the building. And when we come to this part section, it is really gleaming and sort of shining in the sun when you drive down that part of the little road that goes down there. And here, you come around the corner and you see again, white is being introduced a little bit more and more until you come to this section that is the beginning of the entrance, the new entrance. And this is the new entrance. Let me show you a better way. The new entrance. And I think that, I love that entrance. It is very beautiful. Usually you just come from the parking lot, go in and go to the door and go on your business. You don't stand there and look at it. But next time you go to the hospital or any other building that is sort of been renovated, have a look how the architect introduces the new section, blends it in with the old. And I think there's sort of like a spidery roof up there, and you can drive underneath and you don't get wet, and it's very practical as well. And when you then come to the very end of it, that's the end, and you see mostly white, and it looks as though the brown of the initial building, the bricks, is sort of only decoration. It's not quite true. When you walk through the side, you can see they are attached, and there is maybe some weight-bearing element in having that brick section there. But it looks to me as though it's just sort of a beautiful facade, but what's actually carrying the building are these new elements. And that's what I think. Have you ever looked at it carefully when you drive down? No. Well, you will now next time you go there, because you will see even more than what I say, because I cannot show you all the angles, but it's a large building, starts on the hill, comes all the way down, and then in the end comes the garage is over here, and there's very functional and a very beautiful interior for what the hospital is needed. You know what we need for that. So I will have you see one other building where this is taking place, where you have an addition, our very own library, Exeter Public Library. Well, you can see it here, Exeter Public Library. I just heard that the old library, I have a picture of it and I will show you, but there was not an entranceway from the upper level where you're parking. You can now walk across, and it's also done in this new material, a light-colored steel-covered material. I don't know exactly what it is, but it gives some life to the outside. It's mixing the brick itself, the brick that was the old building, with the newer materials. And this section is here very beautiful. And we can see on the side here that this is sort of part of the old building, but this is entirely new. Added onto it. And the combination of it is very nice. So you have the light-colored edging here and a little bit of that light color blending into the building itself. Let's look at the old library. That was when we still had a dam. We had a dam in Exeter, remember that? And you sat there and the water came pretty high. Somebody told me here they would not allow a building to be built that close to the water anymore. but the building is there, and we didn't rip it down to make a new library someplace else. So we did what we did here. And you can see this little part. If you stand over here these days, remember this little part, little sort of a balcony kind of thing. When they redid the library, it became this section here, and it is covered now. So you have a little space to sit outside, which is also very nice. Now, how does the architect here do the integrate the old and the new? Well, here you have again this white stuff, white masonry here, and a masonry here around the window here, the lovely protruding window now, to put these two elements of architecture together. If you see it from here again, it's really a lot more lively, a lot prettier, actually. And when you see the whole thing from the far end here, you can see the walkway here and the garage down here, or the walkway as my car is right here. And so it gives an idea of what is possible for an architect to do when he is faced with using an old building and extending it and making it interesting together. So this is actually the end of my talk, and I want you to tell me, those people who did their homework, who was here last time? So how did you do? You had the homework was to take that sheet of paper and look a little bit of what classical architecture you find in your neighborhood. So what did you find? Did you find a lot in public buildings? Like what, you come from Kingston?
I'm from Danville, and the town hall has the pediments and all that sort of, the pediments and the columns.
Yeah.
You see it almost everywhere, any public.
Once you know what you're looking at,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've seen it all the time, but you looked all the time, but you never actually saw. And that's fun.
I think New Hampshire Chronicle was doing a story on, oh my goodness, I can't remember the town. But all the old buildings had the columns and the pediments and everything. It was kind of cool to see.
Yeah.
For the people in town.
Well, I think once you know the basics, you see more things. If you're not educated at all, you don't often know what you're looking at. We were talking before. If you know a classical, if you have no structure on which you can sort of base what you're looking at, you don't know what the difference is between the Rembrandt and the Picasso. I mean, what's happening here? And so what you do with this sort of little bit of an education, you build yourself a skeleton, a structure, and you can then hang on different things as you learn and as you see more, and as you read some books here and there. And anybody else who wants to say what they discovered in this last week? Yes.
I just have a question.
Yes.
As an architect,
Yes.
does the most famous have a good sized team? Or does
Yes.
he work solo? Or how
Yes,
does-
no. These big structures are no single architect built. Even Frank Lloyd Wright was a solo architect. He had a whole school of students that made the work, and he built these houses in the desert. Yes.
Quick question. The Ionic, Doric, and Corinthian, do they represent different phases in time, or were they all going on at the same time?
No, in different phases in time. They started with the Doric temples. The
Yes.
old temples in
They
Greece,
built on it.
they were massive, and they were solid and huge, and especially smaller ones. These columns were tremendous. I mean, they had them made out of marble, and they're like this, the blocks stacked on top of one another. They're really massive. So for a temple that was not so big, Ionic temples and Corinthian then became much more popular. When you go up to the Acropolis, you have to go in serpentine like this, and you see different groups of people build their little shrines there, and their little shrines are in the smaller temples. And so that was, when people constructed a Parthenon is a monster to construct. You know? And of course, yes, certainly architectural firms, it's not an architect anymore, it's always association and always lots of people that have a hand in designing. But I mean, I think it's so creative what they do. And that's another question, another homework idea that I want to tell you. Why do artists, including artists, do what they do? Why do you do what you do when you're an artist? There are some cases, people said, I'm a painter, I've done nothing better than go to my studio and paint all day, every day. That's what I love to do. Ask them why. You know, is anybody an artist here? Who's an artist here?
No, I have a question. No, just a comment.
Well, let's ask your friends who are artists. Ask them why and next time or times after we can talk about that. Because I think that is very interesting.
Well, I think that's their way of communicating their feelings.
Yes.
That's their avenue for bringing their feelings out to the world, to express themselves.
Yeah. Well, I think my own little, I was going to tell you next time, but I'll tell you, but I think everybody has a creative streak. Everybody here. Whether it's the cake you make for your birthday, for your cousin's birthday, or whether you have a flower bed in the back and water flowers. We have a creative streak. Even we set a beautiful dinner table for your company. This is a creative streak that we all have. And we minimize it. We say, oh, I'm not creative, I can't do anything. Not quite true. And the more you satisfy that creativity in you, the happier a person you are.
Good point.
Huh? Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Recently visited the Kennedy Museum and Library in Boston, and I was awestruck with the beauty of the building, and I was just wondering what your opinion
Oh, that
might be of that.
Oh, that library in the Boston, that in the bottom has the radio station. It's Marjorie something.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, that's a gorgeous building, but it's a classical building. And it is a building dedicated in
Very
big,
important.
in big blocks of rocks, of stone. You know,
Glass.
everything is written in stone in that library, you know. And that's what knowledge is. We go to the library, we learn, and they give credit to the Greeks there. But there is in the back, the new edition, it's not quite like that. So I have to go actually and see whether there is a good transition or whether they just stuck on another part of a brick building. Yes.
We see buildings with pediments,
Yes.
and we see buildings that we know have been inspired architecturally by tents.
Yes.
And what is the relationship?
Well, somebody said to me, well, we need roofs like that because we got snow. Okay, that's very true. But you see a lot of buildings out here that have flat roofs. Also, there must be some electricity out there or some heat, something to keep the snow from accumulating. Well, it's also a nice way of, in the beginning, a square box was a nice way of finishing it up because in the pediment there was some sculpture. And so decoration-wise, it was a nice head and a crown. If it's based on the form of man, the feet, the body, and the head, well, not such a bad idea, you know, to have that sort of. And the Greeks didn't paint or put any color on anything that was structural. Only where the sculpture in the pediment is not structural, that was painted. But everything else that is structural, they were very, very clear of what truth was. The truth is that we shouldn't mix the two.
Yeah.
Interesting.
In Oak Bluffs on Martha's Vineyard, have you been there?
Not Oak Bluff, but
Okay, but in Oak Bluffs was originally a religious revival kind of community. People would go there, you know, as part of a religious movement, I guess. And they lived in tents. And then over time, the tents got bases, and then they were raised up. And so you see the houses now, which have a lot of gingerbread, you know, from the era.
Yeah.
But that all started with a tent.
But it is also a very practical way of making something that encloses a space for us to live. 4 walls and a roof, you can't beat that. You know, unless you have money to engage architects who follow their fancy. If you need something structural and functional, that's still the best way. You can build a shed, it's always 4 square on a roof. Never mind the 3 columns, you know. Yes, Penny, please.
Thinking about the pediment, right?
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, it's leading your eye upward too.
Yes, that too.
It's such a different effect
That's
from
true.
a flat space. And the Greeks, although, you know, it's not the same as our Christian, it's still leading us upward.
That's true.
Higher.
That's very true. And the St. Peter's Dome, when we put domes on it, we go higher to the heavens and
Yeah.
want to be higher to God, you know?
Maybe it was originally structured like a mountain,
Like what?
like a mountain, like it looks like a
Well,
mountain.
yeah, that too. Yeah, all of these answers are correct.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have another thing that I found interesting is the evolution of the Doric and Ionic and,
Corinthian.
what's the last one?
Corinthian.
Yeah, Corinthian sort of is similar to the Christian cathedrals where you start with Romanesque and
Yes.
Gothic and Baroque, which
Yes.
becomes much more ornate
Yes.
and bigger and
Yes.
higher and
But there is a
everything.
development over all these years, you know, they wouldn't all be the same. I have a few other hands going up here. Yes.
And the Frank Lloyd Wright houses associated with the Currier Museum in Manchester are fascinating because
Yeah.
there are two of them and they're so completely different.
Yeah.
And yet Frank Lloyd Wright never saw them.
You never saw them?
No.
I did know them.
Yeah. His team of builders.
I think you have to make it something to see them. But it was worthwhile. I've only seen one, the Zimmerman house, I think, is one.
Okay.
The Frank Lloyd Wright also dictated what's going on the inside.
Yeah.
His dining room tables, his chairs, straight up, never mind tilting back. You read your soup the whole. They were not comfortable, but he didn't care. The Kaufmann house, when he came to visit, he had to get rid of all the cushions and all the stuff, make it comfortable, it had to be, because he was going to rip it all out. That's not me.
And things were
Anyway, he was fun. And when you, if you ever go to the library, you want a good book, there is a book called Loving Frank.
Oh, I love that, yeah.
Ah, Loving Frank. What he went through personally also, that the tragedy of these murders in the family, all of this, but it's a good read. Yes, Mark.
So, was there a philosophical shift between honoring the Greeks with the columns and the pediments to the modern architecture? I mean, did they say,
Enough of that, they said.
but enough of justice,
No.
education, lives, equality,
You can find
and
out.
diversity?
And we now build new civic buildings now. I think what they would look like, I didn't particularly look into that. But I mean, you know, Washington, Pennsylvania Avenue is all Greek temples.
Yeah.
So, but when they build new ones now, it's probably not the case. They're probably more plain, more, I don't know if it can say more interesting, probably not. I don't know. That's something to think about. I will give me some thought.
Frank Lloyd Wright hated that. I mean, he, and also,
Hated what?
hated the Greek, he thought buildings should relate to where they were and to our culture,
Yes.
not necessarily.
That's why he liked to build building in nature. Low slung, close to, you look outside in your gardens and your, you know, he would have like a lot of space for each house, and he did wherever he built. And to hire Frank Lloyd Wright, he had certain requirements, and he wanted to build a beautiful house for you. It costs us money, not everybody can do that. You know.
Can I say one more thing about him?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Falling water, when I was there, you couldn't go out on one of the cantilevered things because it was not,
Not clever
it was
anymore?
not safe out there.
Oh.
And then the Guggenheim is fascinating, but not very successful as a museum.
Well, it wasn't a new thing, right?
Yeah, but I mean, they don't always work. And
Yes,
like you
they
were
don't
saying, the
always work.
furniture is not necessarily comfortable.
Yeah, yes, yes. Yeah.
I think I've observed in the last 10 or 15 years, when you look at downtown Portsmouth that's decided they're gonna put in all these hotels,
Yes.
and you go up to Portland, Maine, and you see new condominium buildings, and the West End in Portsmouth, you
Yeah.
know, which is where the Frank Jones place was, they're like boxy. I think they're looking for cheap.
That's
You know,
it.
the architecture's out the window, they're just rectangles and boxes. They're disgusting to me. I'm very disappointed, and I don't like the Gold Center at all. The theater thing is Phillips Exeter. I think it's terrible.
The theater section in Portsmouth?
Pardon me?
In Portsmouth?
All the hotels? No. The Gold. I was talking about the theater you showed.
Oh, okay, yes.
It's so plain. It's like okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, so anyway, my point was the architects are building cheaper.
Yes.
You know,
If
they
you want
want
to-
more profit, so they're
If you want to
building.
be in Portsmouth, and Portsmouth is only so large, if you want a condo there, you gotta go
you gotta go first, but you can afford it, but cheaper, it's more cheaply, you can hear the neighbors and you can hear the people upstairs, oh, that's not so good, but that's
Right.
here.
Or you can look at those beautiful condos in downtown,
Oh, yeah.
behind town hall. Those have got to be the ugliest buildings in town.
Yeah,
That's another example,
people like to
yes.
live right smack in town, you know?
Yep, that's another
So,
example.
and then you said Portsmouth, it reminds me, I kind of think this about the shopping centers you were showing, and the, you know, they're like a gesture towards architecture, but they're really just a box with
Yes.
some pretty stuff on the front.
Yes.
And the part, a lot of the new apartments in Portsmouth are like that too, they look interesting, but then you realize it's really just a big square box and the people are living in little cubby holes, and that's all,
That's
it feels artificial.
That's the reality of
It feels
our
artificial,
time.
not real
You know.
architecture.
You can't, everybody can't build a Greek temple, and as you said, it's just really not wanted anymore, not needed anymore. As Penny said, it's not of our culture
It
anymore.
just doesn't feel, it feels disingenuous, like if you're gonna build a box,
Yes,
just build a box and say, I built a box, and don't pretend it's not a box.
find out what the prices are for the condo, and you'll forget all about the boxes.
See, I think it doesn't feel good anymore to walk in Portsmouth. If you're in these kind of canyons now. Before there was a openness that's gone.
Like a little port town, a port city,
Yeah.
a fishing place.
Yeah.
Now it's become a hotspot, and the summer forget it, you know, it's so full of tourists. Well, the merchants don't seem to mind the tourists. That's again part of our time. Did you read in the paper that Macy's is selling out? Macy's is closing?
I knew, I knew it was gonna happen.
Can you believe that? The
Yeah.
one in Newington? Macy's.
Yeah.
The
In
Newington
Newington.
one in Newington? And you know why? I think because we all buy from Amazon. We put them out of business.
Yeah.
We put them, my husband's one of them, he orders from Amazon a lot. And it's, the retail stores, I want to see if I want to put a nightgown, I don't want to order one from Amazon. Want to feel.
But that's also part of our time.
And Macy's bought out Jordan Marsh.
They did?
Oh, yeah, long time ago.
And Jordan Marsh built up
I like Jordan Marsh.
You mean Marshalls? No.
No, Jordan Marsh.
You were in New Jersey when it happened.